Fears for a widening conflict as 12 Palestinians are dead and 8 Israeli civilians are badly wounded. Israel's ferocious military operation left a trail of destruction in the West Bank. Rohit has been to one of the hospitals treating the injured as shots and explosions are heard around.
The sound of gunfire, you can just about hear it there. And again, and in the distance, we see smoke, we hear ambulances.
Hours later, a Palestinian militant mowed down pedestrians in Tel Aviv before stabbing people. Tonight, the Israeli operation on the West Bank appears to be over, but is the violence? Also in News at 10 tonight. The scandal that just won't go away for the Tory party. The Met Police launched new Partygate investigations, including one over the infamous Jingle and Mingle party. Train operators to press ahead with closing hundreds of railway ticket offices, despite criticism from vulnerable people who rely on them and anger from unions. As Scotland prepares to honour King Charles in its own ancient ceremony, what do ordinary Scots think of their new monarch? And the rain came down, the brollies went up, but real and sporting royalty made it an eventful day at Wimbledon with more British success too.
This is ITV News at 10 with Rageh Omaar.
Good evening. The dreaded and predicted reprisals against Israel's raid on a Palestinian refugee camp in the occupied West Bank did indeed come to pass in a violent fashion. A Hamas militant drove his car into a bus queue in the Israeli city of Tel Aviv, pulled out a knife and began stabbing people. 8 were wounded. The raid itself, one of the most intense in the West Bank in nearly 2 decades, appears to be ending tonight. Israel says it is withdrawing its troops, but they leave behind at least 12 Palestinian deaths and a warning that there may be similar operations in the near future.
In the city of Jenin tonight, there was no escape from it. Even the hospital grounds shake to the sound of gunfire. In the fading light, commotion outside the operating theatres. Broken stones at the ready as the Israeli operation entered its second night. The doctors and the nurses hardly move as the drones swarm and the heat rises.
The sound of gunfire, you can just about hear it there. And again, and in the distance, we see smoke, we hear ambulances.
Earlier today, at that very same spot, a local television crew filmed what it said were volleys of tear gas being fired. This is an operation that the West Bank has not seen for a generation. A city that witnessed some of the worst fighting of the Second Intifada. I was standing in my kitchen, says this woman, when a bomb exploded. I felt like the world had caught fire. Israel says this is counterterrorism. It's given it the name Operation Home and Garden. Its army released this footage today of what it says is one of its patrols in the basement of a mosque uncovering homemade bombs. But this was downtown Tel Aviv, where a pickup truck was driven into a crowd of people standing outside a shopping centre. The driver emerged wielding a knife, but was shot dead shortly afterwards. 2 of the people who were on the pavement are now in a critical condition, said the police commander. The attacker, he says, was a resident of the Palestinian territories. Tonight, the Israeli military told ITV News that it was withdrawing from the Jenin refugee camp. But some Palestinian groups have said this is a ruse to lure out their targets. They believe the second day of this operation will not be the last.
Well, the refugee camp at the centre of Israel's operation is on the edge of the city of Jenin in the occupied West Bank. It's home to around 14,000 people. The Israeli Defense Forces said it had become home to a terrorist stronghold and command centre from which multiple attacks into Israel had been launched. Rohit is on the West Bank tonight from where he gave us this update just a short while ago.
Rageh, it's been a relatively peaceful evening here. I say relatively because all we can hear, and I'm not sure if you can pick up the sound, is this distant hum of this drone that has been hovering overhead. Despite the suspicions of some Palestinian groups, it does seem to me that the Israeli operation here, if it's not over yet, is certainly coming to a close. But of course, this isn't over in a broader sense, because that battle between these questions about security and self-determination continue. And so despite the scale of the operation of this week, it is really only one paragraph in the long and ongoing story of this conflict. But it's not over in a narrower sense as well, because it's clear that this town, Jenin, which featured so prominently in the Second Intifada, is now being identified by the Israeli military as not just a current, but perhaps a future focal point for its operations. It's talked about it as being a terrorist hotbed, a terrorist factory. And so, speaking to the civilians today, it appears that there is an expectation here that even if this operation is over, even if it somehow doesn't escalate, the military, the Israeli military, will return, and so will violence.
Rohit reporting from the West Bank. Now back here, Partygate has reared its head again for the Conservative Party, even though London's Metropolitan Police had already investigated the 2020 Christmas party in Conservative headquarters once. Then came the leaking of that infamous video of drinking and dancing, the so-called Jingle and Mingle party. Well, now they've had a rethink and they will reopen the investigation into potential breaches of lockdown rules because of evidence not previously provided.
What happened in this building at the height of lockdown is tonight the subject of a police investigation. A December 2020 Christmas party at Conservative Party headquarters, organised on behalf of Sean Bailey's campaign for London Mayor. Despite this photo, last year the Met Police said no further action would be taken.
As long as we don't scream that we're like...
Since then, video footage has emerged, as well as details of an invitation for guests to jingle and mingle, prompting the police to look again. Following assessment of new evidence that was not previously provided to officers, the Met is now reopening an investigation into potential breaches of the regulations at an event in Matthew Parker Street on the 14th of December 2020.
I apologise, excuse me, I'm out of breath.
Sean Bailey was last month appointed to the House of Lords by Boris Johnson and was already facing calls to be blocked from taking up his peerage.
Unreservedly, I apologise then and I apologise now. It's a staff team that were given to me that I should... The buck eventually stops with me.
Do you think you should hand over your peerage? I mean,
look, that'll be for others to decide.
For people, including some constituents of mine, this really is quite visceral. People lost loved ones, or indeed ordinary members of the public were fined for breaking COVID rules. People cannot be seen in politics to be above the law.
Police have also opened a new investigation into an alleged lockdown party held inside Parliament, attended by 3 Conservative MPs. No further action will be taken over 2 events held in Downing Street and Chequers. Many Conservatives hope the worst of Partygate was now firmly in the past. But what happened here at Conservative Party headquarters back in December 2020 could still prove to be damaging among voters in the future. Rishi Sunak has tried to distance himself from his party's recent scandals.
You didn't turn up for the Boris Johnson votes at all, did you?
No, I was at a charity dinner for Jewish Care.
Today, MPs asked why he missed a vote on whether to sanction Boris Johnson.
And other members of Parliament who were at the same dinner with you and left after you did manage to get back for the vote.
I think, with greatest respect, I think their role and my role at the dinner probably slightly different.
With 3 by-elections later this month, it won't be long before we all find out if voters have forgiven his party after a turbulent year. Harry Horton, News at 10.
And Robert joins me. Robert, we're back here yet again on Partygate. And bad news, I mean, obviously for those involved, but what's the wider, damaging circumstances for the Tories in all this?
Well, the backdrop is things aren't going desperately well for Rishi Sunak in, well, frankly, the agenda that he set himself. It is 6 months to the day that he announced 5 pledges, 3 relating to the economy, 1 health, 1 curbing the boats coming across the channel with asylum seekers. And by now, he had hoped, because I remember talking to him and those around him at the time, that he would be showing progress. And truthfully, almost nothing that he wants to achieve is going in the right direction. Inflation still, in an underlying sense, rising, going in the opposite direction from the way that he wants it to go. The economy, because of the significant rises in interest rates we are seeing, many economists think heading for recession. He's pledged to grow the economy, so that's the opposite of what he wants to achieve. He's got this debt target, but it's sort of meaningless because he said he's going to get the debt down, but the target is for 5 years away. So, that was never going to be hit before the election. We've got these doctors' strikes, which means that his hopes of getting waiting lists down have had a major setback. And, we just had that court decision that he cannot send asylum seekers to Rwanda. Now, we saw in Harry's film him seeing a group of MPs on the so-called liaison committee today. He was asked if he had frankly, a backup plan for any of these things, especially, when it comes to, asylum seekers in Rwanda. The answer is no. He sort of hopes that, if he stays the course, things will start to move in the right direction. But he's sort of learning the hard way that as a Prime Minister, you can announce plans, but you may not have the levers to pull.
Indeed so. Robert, thank you very much indeed. Now, in the middle of a pay dispute with railway workers might not seem like the best time to announce the closure of hundreds of ticket offices in stations in England. Well, almost all of them, in fact. 7 out of 8 tickets are now bought from machines or online. Unions are angry at the plan for the from the train operators. And Chris, our consumer editor, is at London's King's Cross station. Chris, it seems this news is already making a lot of people very unhappy, and not just the unions.
Absolutely. I mean, it's hard to imagine, frankly, this industry being riddled with more dispute. Yet tonight we are looking at the prospect of a major clash between rail unions and bosses over the mass closure of ticket offices in England. Now, the rail industry appears to be relying on some pretty stark facts. It is saying that back in 1995, 85% of tickets were bought in ticket offices. Now that's down to about 12%. And so tomorrow, when we expect these plans to be announced, we think they will involve hundreds of ticket offices. At the moment, about 3 in 5 stations have one. It's thought, incidentally, that large transport hubs like here at King's Cross will continue to have offices. As for other places, well, passengers would be left using self-service machines, contactless cards and buying tickets on the trains. But this is going to be a very big battle indeed. Already the RMT and the TSSA rail unions have declared themselves staunchly against these proposals. They've described them using words like pointless and daft. They're getting support tonight from some disability groups who fear the plans would make it much harder for vulnerable passengers to use this network.
All right, Chris, in central London, thanks very much indeed for that. Now, a man who deliberately set fire to the house next door by pouring petrol through the letterbox, killing his neighbour and her daughters, has been found guilty of their murders. Fatoumata Haidara and her daughters, Fatima and Niama, died last November in what the court heard was a row about rubbish left in an alleyway.
1-year-old Naima and her 3-year-old sister Fatima. 2 happy little girls who died together with their mother Fatoumata Haidara in the most horrific circumstances. Last November, their father returned home from working abroad, having been told his wife and daughters had been killed in a devastating fire, started deliberately by their neighbour.
Words cannot quantify how much our family have suffered because of the horrific actions of one man. His actions were utterly heartless and cruel and have caused a multi-generational trauma that we will never understand.
The emergency services had arrived that night to find the flat engulfed by orange flame, the street filled with smoke. The fire had been started by Jamie Barrow, who afterwards was more concerned about getting back into his flat.
Yeah, can I have my pin and get some waterproof gear? I wouldn't, mate, to be honest. Is it that bad?
He knew very well how bad it was because he'd poured petrol through the letterbox and set it alight. He also knew that this door was the only way out of the flat. CCTV shows how quickly the flames took hold, the gardens lighting up as the flat caught fire. As he walked away, Barrow would have heard the girls screaming, but did nothing to help.
At this point in time, I'm going to place you under arrest for murder.
Police don't know why he started the fire, but think Barrow, who had a personality disorder, may have had a grudge against the family about rubbish bags left outside the flat. A number of their relatives and friends were at court to support a father as he remembered his girls and his wife.
If love and compassion could make a person immortal, she would have lived forever. She was most incredible mother to Fatima and Naima, 2 angels who deserve a very beautiful childhood and a full life.
When they died, his wife and daughters were about to join him in America, where he was working, to start a new life. But they were robbed of that future together. Ben Chapman, News at 10, Nottingham.
If you were watching last night, you will not have forgotten our report on puppy yoga classes, where paying customers relax with very young puppies that can become stressed, thirsty and exhausted. Well, today a whole range of voices have been raised against the classes after our investigation. They include MPs and vets at a meeting in Parliament. They also include a celebrity influencer, a former Love Island contestant. Puppies are not fashion accessories, she told us.
For a social media generation that trades on the currency of likes and shares, puppy yoga is a guaranteed winner. Very young, very small dogs. What's not to like? Quite a lot, it turns out. Our undercover cameras found some dogs placed in very warm rooms, being denied water.
Is there any water right there? They have water. No. Might make them pee more. Yeah.
Some removed from their mother just a few weeks into their life.
How old were they when they started doing the yoga?
They've been coming yoga since they were 6.5 weeks old.
The RSPCA and the Kennel Club condemned our findings from classes across the country, with tired dogs being mishandled, dropped and deprived of sleep, constantly woken up despite taking themselves into the corner of the room.
Welcome, everyone.
Today, MPs and leading veterinary experts expressed concerns at our findings in Parliament.
The reporters Daniel Hewitt and Sam Leader ran a piece on ITV News on a new syndrome called puppy yoga, really raising significant welfare concerns.
Yeah, I mean, I think we would have serious concerns about the welfare of those puppies. We'd be concerned that it's a sort of marketing tool for puppy sales and irresponsible puppy sales.
Separate from that, issues of respecting animals and of commodifying cute animals for human gain.
And talk has also turned to whether prosecutions may follow.
If you're not providing the basic provisions for an animal, such as fresh, clean drinking water, that is the sort of thing that we actually see fairly routinely prosecuted under the Animal Welfare Act in this country.
At up to £40 per class, puppy yoga has become big business and a big hit with celebrities and influencers. But this former Love Island contestant and dog campaigner says it has to stop.
Didn't we ban animals in circuses like years and years and years ago, decades ago? So why are we using dogs for yoga? Go to the RSPCA, go and help out. Go to the guide dogs and help out there. Like, there's so many options if you want to go spend time with puppies, but they're not a fashion accessory.
The question now is whether others will see it the same way. Daniel Hewitt, News at 10.
Well, now to a tale in 280 characters. A challenger to Twitter. The Facebook boss, Mark Zuckerberg, is launching his own version, Threads, it'll be called, as the business and personal rivalry with his fellow tech boss, Elon Musk, escalates. There, that's only 254 characters. Well, Lucy's here to tell us a little bit more about this in a few more words than that. Lucy.
I am indeed, Rageh. Now, I can definitely add a few more to that. With this, the clash of the tech titans once again. Now, later this week, Mark Zuckerberg's company, Meta, which owns Facebook, Instagram and WhatsApp, is about to launch a new app called Threads, a place for public conversation online. But it is also a direct challenge to Twitter and its owner, Elon Musk, and something Zuckerberg has wanted to do for some time.
These guys are, some of the richest men in the world and are in charge of some of the most powerful, biggest tech companies in the world. And there is a long history of Mark Zuckerberg wanting to do something that could take on Twitter. He's always felt that he could do it better and that Twitter never lived up to expectations or its potential.
And he is taking that opportunity to do better, perhaps, on Thursday when he'll release Threads on the App Store. So how are these two apps different? How are they similar? Let's take a look at Twitter first. Now, Elon Musk bought it last October for £38 billion. It has around 300 million users across the world. But since last year, Musk has sacked nearly half its workforce. He's also launched Twitter Blue, which is where users have to pay for a subscription for verification. And he's lifted the ban on restricted users like Donald Trump. And as of this weekend, Musk imposed even more limits on users on how many tweets they can read each day, only 600. Now, this fresh turmoil has opened the door for Zuckerberg to strike and capitalise on the chaos. Now, Threads, it seems, will be a free service with no restrictions on how many posts a user can see every day. Being owned by Meta means it will be part of the Instagram platform, with users able to follow people they already do on there, giving them access to its hundreds of millions of users. Now, logging into Threads, you might not notice the difference. The two rival apps actually look rather similar. On the left is a sample idea of what a message on Threads will look like. And on the right is a recent Elon Musk tweet on Twitter. There's not much in it. And Meta is even describing Threads as a text-based conversation app. Sound familiar? Now, Meta is the most credible competitor to Twitter in years, and it has deep pockets and a huge audience, Rageh.
That's very interesting. Thanks very much indeed, Lucy. Now, tomorrow in Edinburgh, in an ancient ceremony, the King will be presented with what are known as the Honours of Scotland, the Scottish crown jewel. It will be quite an occasion to celebrate, but not for everyone. Some members of the Scottish Government are planning to protest against it.
The first Holyrood week for King Charles and his first garden party here as monarch. Joined in Edinburgh today by Queen Camilla, and the Scottish summer rain also paid a visit. But the King knows the climate here well, that it's a period of political uncertainty for Scotland's place in the UK, but also that the monarchy's place in Scotland far predates that union.
The origins of the Scottish monarchy to begin with, it's the 9th century, long before England had its king and queen, at a time when monarchies and nation states in Europe were unusual. So the Scottish monarchy is ancient.
In modern times, the late Queen's love for Scotland was born on childhood trips to Balmoral and endured her whole life. Those who worked with the royal family say the King has grown up with that connection, which he now inherits.
The now King has, of course, his home on the Balmoral estate, which it was once said to me by a former member of their household that they regard Birk Hall as their marital home. It's got to be understood that as King and Head of State, that he understands what the current issues are, throughout the country, not just for Scotland, but because he spends so much time in Scotland, I think he genuinely does understand the Scots.
But the affinity is not universally reciprocated.
First Minister of Scotland.
Scotland now has an avowed Republican as First Minister, and in recent polling, support for the monarchy here was the lowest in the UK. While the King met Humza Yousaf today, members of his government from the Green Party said they'll be protesting tomorrow's service to mark the coronation.
We should be, challenging ourselves, challenging each other on our views on these things and working out how we get to a different kind of future that has democracy at its heart.
Dunfermline in the Kingdom of Fife is where Charles made his first official visit to Scotland as King last year. People we spoke to there today are as divided as the nation.
A grand ceremony, there'll be a lot of extravagance, and for working class people that can be really painful and frustrating.
Personally, I'm on the fence with the kind of monarchy. I respect the history and this kind of story of the monarchy, the story of Scotland and where it sits within the Union.
I remember the Queen coming here years ago. I think she's fantastic. Well, she was fantastic. I know she's away now, but she was fantastic. And Charles, I like Charles as well, and his wife.
Tomorrow, King Charles will be presented with the honours of Scotland, and thousands will line the streets. Many more Scots will be watching how he engages, not just with the traditions of their nation, but with their lives and their concerns about what role the royals have in a modern Scotland. Peter Smith, News at 10, Edinburgh.
Well, in another sign of divisions in Scotland, the Orkney Islands just could be on the way out of the United Kingdom after more than 500 years. Councillors there voted today to look into exploring other ways of being governed. They say they have had enough of not being taken seriously by the UK and Scottish governments. They want more funding and a new fleet of ferries, the Scottish mainland. The council leader says it is not simply about becoming part of Norway. Finally, the Royal Box at Wimbledon hosted both the real thing in the shape of Princess Kent and the man crowned champion 8 times, Roger Federer. They sat together to watch another former champion, Sir Andy Murray, make it through to the second round. Cameron Norrie is also through. Dan Evans, delayed from yesterday, is not. The new British number 1, Katie Boulter, was one of those who had her match suspended because of the rain.
With a star-studded British lineup at Wimbledon, the Princess of Wales arrived keen to see some of the action. Her thoughts the same as every other tennis fan today.
Just hoping the rain stays off. I know.
She headed for court 18.
We have some very special guests.
To watch Britain's new number 1, Katie Boulter. But with Boulter leading Australian Daria Saville by 6 games to 5, the brollies were up and the covers went on. The Princess quickly ushered to centre court, where there was a standing ovation for the arrival of tennis royalty, Roger Federer, in the Royal Box. And so to the much-anticipated Battle of the Brits, as 2 times Wimbledon champion Sir Andy Murray and 27-year-old Ryan Peston, in only his 2nd Wimbledon main draw, took to centre court. Murray took his time to get going against left-hander Peston as he took the first set 6-3.
Too long, it was more of a fight.
But the Scot stepped up a gear, outclassing Peston with his power and experience. Murray safely through to round 2.
It's been a long time since I've, felt sort of physically this good coming into Wimbledon, which is, really, really positive. The last few years, have been very, very challenging. So, yeah, I'm hoping I'm fit and ready for a good run.
Meanwhile, under the roof of court number 1, British number 1 Cam Norrie gave fans another reason to cheer, beating Czech Tomáš Machač in 4 sets. Dan Evans found his mojo again briefly in a rescheduled late-night match on centre court. 2 sets down yesterday, he won the 3rd against Contanalise, but was knocked out after the Frenchman took the 4th.
Game, set, and match.
With heavy rain dominating the day, all outside matches were cancelled. The weather hasn't been playing ball for Wimbledon. For British hopes, the tennis gods have been a little kinder. Martha Fairley, News at 10, Wimbledon.
Well, not all bad at Wimbledon, despite the rain. And that's it from all of us tonight. Thank you for watching. Good night.